we're going to go. And we'll burp and cough once we start. All right, here we go. Yes! Oh my, you made it to another episode, I almost said session, of the Podcast Engineering Show. Well, you somehow got here. Maybe you butt dialed the show, right? That has happened before. I've gotten emails like that before. Someone says, "Oh, your show started playing, and I couldn't turn it off." Anyway, my name is Chris Curran. I produce podcasts for big companies and medium companies, and I also run Podcast Engineering School, which is where you can learn how to engineer and produce podcasts at a professional level. And every week on this show, we bring you podcast production techniques on a silver platter. We talk shop with podcast producers, engineers, and other specialists. And my burp is coming, but I don't know when it's going to... Oh, all right.
Oh, there it was.
Wow, I feel better. I was going to have to do the old trick my mom taught me, like when you're in bed and you have to burp and you just can't burp, then you just you lean to one side for 5 or 10 seconds. And then you lean to the other side for 5 or 10 seconds, and just maybe lean forward for 5 or 10 seconds, and it frees up the air in your stomach, and then you burp.
Well, with a burp, the gas is going to escape. That's probably the preferable option.
Well, I'm going to introduce you in a second, Mr. Barry Gary. But I want to tell the listeners, look, if you implement the best of what you learn here, your podcast will sound a lot better, and you'll spend less time producing them. And, of course, Barry is here with me. Barry, are you ready to go? Can you believe Barry Gary's here, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. I can't believe it.
Oh, forget it.
I'm telling you. All right. Anyway, the next Podcast Engineering School semester starts soon. You can check that out. But Barry Gary is here. You guys got to know about Barry Gary. He is the host of the Louisville Cycling Podcast. The Louisville Cycling Podcast. And he's a graduate of Podcast Engineering School.
Yeah.
Wow. Congratulations. Wow. And he's also, in the past, has been a director, or you still are a director of learning and development in the healthcare field?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Okay, cool. That's what you do during the day, and then you cycle at night.
Well, yeah, to cycle at night, try to do podcast at night. I'm just all over the place.
And have you ever, we're going to get into everything, but have you ever recorded audio while riding your bike?
Well, actually I have. And it's, especially when you're doing a podcast that focuses around cycling, sometimes you got to get out there where the cyclists are and the cycling is happening. So I've been trying to do a lot of experimentation on how to capture things as it occurs.
I can picture you riding on your bike and holding a shotgun microphone, pointing it at the guy cycling right next to you.
Well, the hard part is a lot of times it just sounds like a lot of heavy breathing.
That's true. I think it was Cliff Ravenscraft. He went through a phase where he was recording episodes while he was walking. And so he'd be walking, and at the very start it'd be fine, but after he got walking, he'd be panting and out of breath, and it was weird. It was just weird listening to a podcast where the guy he's just panting and talking.
Yeah. Well, and I usually try to catch people when they get off the bike, but it's really kind of strange because you have to be able to know how much time you let elapse between the time they finish what they're doing, and you can really talk to them and get some sense out of them, because most of the races and things I try to cover are pretty intense affairs.
Oh, right. So when they right when they cross the finish line, you can't go right up to them then with the microphone.
Yeah, unless they win, then it's okay.
Oh well, because then they're then they might start to tear up and thank God and thank
if they come in second, give them a minute.
Or you might get slapped.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. So let's do the speed round, Barry. Okay, because you got a bunch of equipment there. Oh, and I wanted to say right off the bat, because this is actually interesting and helpful, that we tried to record this interview maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we couldn't. Something was wrong. We were connected through either Zencastr or Squadcast, one of those, and we just couldn't hear each other, and something was wrong. And we tried a bunch of things to figure it out. We didn't figure it out because it was I won't say a weird little thing that was going on, but something that's kind of strange that you wouldn't really expect. I should have known it. I'm going to say right now that I should have known it. And because once we found out what it was, then I was like, oh God, yes, I forgot about that. But it is a little weird. So here's the thing. You have a Zoom L12, and that's your audio interface. And the L12 is also a recorder, right?
Yeah, it records too.
Yeah, multi-track, right? Like 8 tracks or something?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's got 8 tracks. And when we were talking, it's really kind of strange because the reason we actually ran into the problems because the cord that I used, the cable that I used to go into my DB86 was too short to reach over to input 1, so I had it in like input 7. It was a matter of inches that kept us from connecting.
Yes. So here's the thing, just to explain what happened real quick. So like Barry just said, instead of being plugged into channel 1 of his L12, he was plugged into channel 7. Now, here's the funny thing that happens with some of these interfaces that are multi-track, meaning more than 2 tracks. Like, because if it's let's say it's a Focusrite Scarlett 2i2, you can pretty much plug into input 1 or 2, and it'll go through. It'll go through Zencastr or Squadcast, or it'll go into any software. It kind of goes through. But when you have something that's multi-track, for instance, the L12 that you have, the Zoom L12, and others probably, sometimes, and I don't know why, but sometimes the only channels that'll get through are channels 1 and 2. So for instance, on your L12, channels 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, they're not going into the computer, really. Mm-hmm. So that's why we couldn't hear you. You were plugged into channel 7. You were talking. You even saw level on the L12. So you could see your own voice on the L12, but I couldn't hear you. And so that's something to really just be aware of. If you're ever plugging gear in the future and it's multi-track, if it's just you, for instance, with a microphone, pretty much plugging into channel 1 is always the best because you're pretty much sure that one's going to get out and get through. So anyway.
Yeah, and the strange part was when I record my episodes, Reaper picked it up. So it was going into my computer. It just wasn't going through Squadcast to get to you.
Yeah, so that's a great point. So in Reaper, because if you have your L12 configured properly within your computer, Reaper will see inputs 1 through 8. And you can pretty much record any input you want in Reaper because it's a multi-track DAW. But Chrome, which is what we were connecting on Zencastr or Squadcast, I forget. Right now we're connected on Squadcast.
I think we tried them all.
Oh, that's right. We tried them all. But here's the thing. Chrome, again, might only take the first 2 inputs. And that's what it was doing. So, and there's ways around it too. You can create virtual instruments. And I'm even probably on your L12, there's a way to tell the L12 to collapse all the inputs down to a stereo pair or something. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Well, I do know it's beyond my capabilities of use for it.
Right, exactly. So yeah. it just like, think about that. That's such a little thing, right? You wouldn't expect that, but that's how a lot of, well, not a lot, but some audio equipment's like that. It's like things are very simple, but it's just not working, and it's usually something weird like that.
Well, and that kind of gives away, you're part of the speed round, so we're eventually going to get to an L12.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Let's do the speed round. And you know how to do the speed round, which is awesome. So let's go through your equipment. Your mic, what it's plugged into, and then in the computer, what software, and in general how you're doing post-production, and then all the way up until you create the MP3 and upload it.
Well, and I am familiar with speed round, and I haven't actually timed my practice, but I have practiced, and so I think I'm ready to go. Yeah, and so it starts off kind of difficult because we even had a little experience together where you helped me in trying to pick out a microphone because I have several microphones. I'm a little bit of a gearhead, and so right now I'm talking into a Heil PR40, but I've also tried a SM7B. I've got a Rode Procaster in my closet, an RE320, a bunch of Shure SM-58s, but right now I'm in the Heil PR40. It goes through a Cloudlifter, into my DBX 286, which I really don't do a whole lot of processing with the 286. It just kind of runs through, and I've got maybe a little bit of compression, a little bit of de-esser, but that's about it. From there, it goes into my Zoom L12. When I'm recording, I record, on the L12 onto an SD card, but I'm also recording into Reaper at the same time, and I record it at 24-bit 48K. And so usually what I do is I take those two files, and when it comes to the post-production, I probably overdo it a little bit. I always take the interview files that I'm doing and run them through RX7 and run like phase, loudness, declick, deplosive, declip, voice denoise. I kind of clean it up there first. I give it the whole kind of suite of stuff. And then what I do in Reaper, I take it and I take the two files. And one of the things I have in my room where I do the podcast is, I don't know if I have difficulty getting people to stay close enough to the mic or what, but I seem to pick up a lot of bleed. And so I go into Reaper and I take the two files, my file, my track, and the guest track, and I go through Reaper with those, and I do the processing on the individual tracks to try to make them sound as good as I can. And then I cut out a lot of the bleed that's in between. So like when the guest is talking, I cut out the stuff, and of course then you have to kind of fade in, fade out on each end of it. So it's a pretty time intensive process. So I do that, and I've actually tried to do that a little bit with some gates too, and have had mixed results doing it that way. But I cut that out, and then I reduce that track down to one track that's a WAV file. I throw that over to Twistedwave, and in Twistedwave I do my detail editing because it's a little bit easier for me to cut things out and really hone in on things there. Then I take that file, drop it into a template I have set up in Audition. And Audition's really where I mix it all together because I usually record some intro tracks and outro tracks for the episodes myself. And I have like a module chain in there from my voice. And then there's one advertiser that I have a little piece in there, and all those are in the template. So I just dump the interview file in there and mix it all together right there in Audition. And usually I've been sending it through Auphonic for a final kind of leveling. And usually the MP3 that I get from Auphonic is the one that I upload to Libsyn and send out to the world.
Nice. All right. Wow. Great speed round. I appreciate that, Barry.
Well, I'm a PES school graduate, so I had to do a good job.
And you mentioned a bunch of stuff we kind of learned and studied in the course, which is really good. And it's stuff that actually on this show I don't talk about very much, a bunch of the stuff that you just said. So this is going to be great. So we're going to spend a lot of time, picking through what you just said in the speed round and kind of going through it in more detail and explaining it, better. And
I do have a totally separate setup portable too. I use an F8N, a Zoom F8N for the portable thing with a lot of, with different mics and everything too. So I got kind of a different setup for portable stuff as well.
Okay. So wait, so you got the Zoom F8N.
Yeah, I've got the Zoom F8N, and I've got some Shure SM-58s that I take with me because they're pretty much indestructible. But I also have a few of the HD280. No, not the HD280. The Audio Technica headphones that have the piece in it that the microphone built into it.
Oh yeah, the BPH S1.
Yeah, I have those because a lot of times the people I talk to are not, they're not very mic savvy. So even though they may not get as good a sound as some of the other microphones do, at least they're always on mic because when they move around and looking around to see who's winning this race and who's winning that race, they're still talking on mic. And so that's really my portable setup.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Cool. So wait, how much of your show do you record on location?
I'd say I probably do 75%, face to face, and about 25% on location. We went to a race this weekend, a gravel race in Hastings, Michigan, and I took some stuff to capture some audio because there's a little bit of ambiance that happens when you're right there at a race, and when you capture things when it's all fresh, there's something that's a little magical about capturing it right there too. But a lot of times I'll come back and do some follow-up work with people, and maybe folks that we've talked about things at races, we come back and kind of do some follow-up in studio or remotely just to kind of, add to it.
Wait, you said a gravel race? What is a gravel race?
Well, it's hard. That's what it is. It's all, usually you take all these gravel roads out in the middle of nowhere that are usually have too steep of climbs, and they're too in the middle of nowhere for the cars don't really use them anymore. And so they pick out, 60, 70, 100 miles of gravel, and they say, well, we're going to start you here and you're going to come back in 100 miles and the first guy that gets here wins. And it's miserable. And it was particularly miserable for me this past weekend because I'm about 10 weeks out from a total hip replacement. And so this was my first test, and my hip is great. I mean, doctors do amazing things with hips.
Oh,
but the engine needs some work.
Oh, well, you got to build it back up, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, me too. I'm getting ready to start training to climb another 14er here in Colorado.
Oh, wow.
But that climbing a 14er though, like we do the easy ones, and we literally we drive up to about 12,000 feet, and then we hike maybe 3 or 4 miles up to the top, which is a little above 14,000 feet. So not a major hike, but at that altitude, you got to be ready because the breathing is completely different up there. So
well, I've actually hiked Pikes Peak right there in your neighborhood.
Oh yeah, wait, you went up the what trail is it?
I'm not sure what the name of the trail was, but we were there and thought,
the Bar Trail.
Yeah, Bar Trail, and we hiked up, and our goal was to get up. I think it was August, and our goal was to make sure it at least got up past snow. So we wanted to get into snow, and we did.
That's cool. Yeah. So all right, good. So all right, well, let's go back through it. So you got the Heil PR40. You also have a Shure SM-7B, and you also have you have an RE320 and a Rode Procaster as well, right?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So wait, then have you tested your voice on all 4 or 5 of your mics and decided which one you like best?
I have, and I continue to go back and forth. I mean, one of the biggest issues for me being kind of I think I'm a little more serious than a hobbyist podcaster, but I have a real full-time job. And,
right.
And it's one of those things where if I had a week to sit down and just play with every microphone and play with every plug-in and kind of put, 2 and 2 together, I'd land on something. But I keep going back between the SM-7B, this PR40, and, I think a while back, I actually sent you some just raw files with different microphones, which was a great disappointment to me because you said my voice sounded best on my cheapest microphone.
and by the way, for the listeners, I didn't know which was which.
Yeah.
And so yeah, you just sent me a bunch of files. You knew which was which, but I didn't. So wait, which one did I pick out?
I think you actually picked the Rode Procaster as the one that was best for my voice. And it probably is. And again, ear training is something that takes years and years, and I'm still kind of early on in trying to define what sound sounds like. And so it's, even, I just haven't quite, been able to convince myself that the cheapest one is the best one.
Right. And you bring up a great point too. You know what I would really love to do? And it's never going to happen. I already know this. I shouldn't say that though. But here's what I would love. Like, instead of my original vision of podcast engineering school was literally like a week in person, like 5 days in person, just going nuts with all kinds of gear, and doing everything, right? So that obviously when I first started the school, that wasn't really realistic because it's just easier for people to attend online and way cheaper. I mean, right? Imagine having to fly somewhere and stay in a hotel and then pay the tuition and all that. So, but you bring up a great point. Maybe someday there's a way I can raise enough money where, I could offer something like, hey, let's go, rent a cabin, like a big cabin with a bunch of bedrooms, like for a whole week or something. We can do all that stuff we want to do, right? Have time to do it.
Well, and I tell you, and there's some benefit to, I mean, again, I could see in a situation where you have, 5 or 6 microphones sitting out and people can record and share their recordings with each other and talk about why they like one or the other. I think there's a big learning experience in that, in sharing what different people hear in your voice from different microphones.
Yeah. And then we could also have like a mixing station or several, but we could have like really good studio monitors set up. So like, you, Barry, could walk up with your laptop and plug it into whatever interface, and you could mix your episode in a studio environment with real studio monitors that are, really high quality. And I don't know. See, this is the thing. I think of things that would be cool and awesome, but then I don't know how to make it happen.
Yeah. Well, we could probably spend a week just teaching me how to use Shep's omni-channel.
That's a great one, huh? So, all right. So you got the PR40. See, the PR40 sounds good on you, though. I mean, it sounds good on a lot of people, and it's a good mic. It's just, the whole thing, like, well, let's put it this way. We all know that somehow the Blue Yeti got this reputation as, oh, that's the mic you buy if you're going to do a podcast, right? And we don't know how that came about or why it still persists, but that's just the truth. People just buy Blue Yetis. Maybe they search online like, I want to start a podcast. What mic should I buy? And everyone says Blue Yeti and they buy it. But the Heil PR40 is similar, but to a lesser extent, because, Cliff and a bunch of others have, or maybe not a bunch of others, several others have been, suggesting people use that mic for years. And it's just like people, I don't know what it is. It's in people's minds that like, oh, some people think that's the best podcasting mic. And again, it's a great mic, but it's you can't say that any mic is the best, right? It's because it's different for every person, I think.
Well, and like we just talked about, I've got several good mics, and from a third-party perspective, the one that was probably the least expected was the one that sounded best on my voice. And so, I like the Heil PR40. You just have to be careful with it. I mean, I've got it going into a Cloudlifter, and it will distort if you get it too hot. Oh. And so I just have to be careful and make sure that I know exactly where my levels are before I get started.
Okay. So you bring up Cloudlifter. So again, for the listeners, I'm like so far ahead in my schedule. We're recording this on April 18th, and if that date rings a bell, yes, I just like an hour ago recorded Zach Moreno from Squadcast. So, but anyway, it's April 18th, and this isn't going to come out till literally probably August, Barry. So, but it's April 18th for me right now. And last week was NAB, and Roger Cloud, I met him, and he gave me a Cloudlifter, and I've never had one before. So I brought it home. I haven't had time to try it yet, but I'm definitely going to try it. So what is your experience with your Cloudlifter, Barry?
Well, I bought it for the Shure SM-7B because I was having a difficult time getting a good level with the SM-7B, and it was, and I really liked it because it really brought it up to a point to where I felt like it was a good and strong enough signal that it was, because I had the Shure SM-7B here and someone talking over here on maybe the Procaster or something else, and there was a big variance in the levels. And so I would have to go and level them out and all those kind of things. So I've had good experience with it. I didn't take it off. One of the things that it lets me do, if I look at I've got two DBX86s here, one for each microphone, because usually very rarely do I have more than one guest at a time. And so I have two DBXs, and the one with the Cloudlifter is, maybe at, 10 or 11 o'clock.
Oh, the preamp.
The preamp. And the one without the Cloudlifter is probably at 4 o'clock.
Whoa!
And so it really helps, and I think it seems like it's pretty clean too.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, and I can't wait to try it because anyway, I'll talk about it more after I try it. But that's good that it's with the SM7B, definitely it helps bring that gain up for sure. And the DBXs you're talking about are 286Ss, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's what those are the little, well, it's kind of like it is a channel strip. It has a mic pre, it has a compressor, it has the little, I forget what they call it, the contour or tone. It's like you can add low end or add high end.
Enhancer.
Yeah, it's kind of like an EQ.
Yeah, and I don't use a lot of that. I mean, pretty much, and it's got an expander gate on it, and but for the most part, I may use a little bit of compression out of there, but that's about it because One of the things I learned from you is that it's better to record it in a way that you can fix it later if it's wrong.
Right. Yeah, an exciter is what I was thinking. I just couldn't think of it, and I was looking it up. Yeah, an exciter. So those two knobs for the low end and the high end, I don't know if they're straight up EQs or if they're EQs with that are exciters as well, because they are very smooth. Meaning the one that adds high end, it to me it sounds like it's more than an EQ. It's doing more than adding high end. I think it's exciting the high end as well. So anyway, that's a little technical question. I should probably go find the answer and report back.
Well, it seems like everybody and their brother has a DBX 286S.
Yeah, it's definitely a good model. And you know what's funny? I've actually, some people, I forget who. Maybe it was, I can't remember who it was, but or maybe even several people. They were telling me their equipment setup, and they had a DBX 286 in their signal chain. And I think the only thing they were doing with it was like using it for the mic preamp.
Mm-hmm.
But then the interface they were going into after that had a great mic preamp as well, like, or maybe even better. Maybe it was like a Mix Pre 6 or something. I don't know. And I just told the person, I'm like, you know what? You just take the 286 out of your signal chain because you don't need it.
Well, and I have my L12 is turned down all the way. So I don't use the preamps on the L12. I use it on the DBX 286. And
yes.
And I don't know which one is cleaner, which one I should be using, but it just seems like it sounds a little better when I run through the DBX than the L12.
Yeah. Well, in your case, that does make sense. Yeah. The DBX mic pre is probably, well, I'd say definitely better than the L12. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's what you do. If you ever do use a channel strip that has a mic pre, you would use that mic pre, because obviously the first thing, when you plug a mic in, the first thing you have to do is preamp it up. That's like you can't do any compressing, EQing, can't do anything until you use a preamp to bring it up to line level. But then when you come out of your 286, for instance, when you go into your Zoom L12, you're right. You should turn that preamp all the way down, like all the way to the left, adding zero gain or whatever, as little gain as possible. And that way you don't preamp it twice.
Yeah. So see, I listened in class. Now you know.
I know. See, this is, I really appreciate when students listen and learn, and then they do it, and then they benefit. It's just great.
Well, and here's, and again, I'm not, don't intend to make this a commercial or anything, but literally my audio experience was pretty much zero. And I decided that, I've been listening to podcasts since Dave Jackson was in diapers, but I haven't really, and then I thought, well, this could be a kind of a cool thing to do. And I kind of got away from cycling a little bit when my son was growing up and decided to get back in. And I really used it as a way to reconnect with the community and doing something here locally where I could learn what's going on. And, I call it a podcast that celebrates the people, events, and rides that make Louisville a great place for cyclists. And I knew nothing about podcasting other than I like listening to them. And so reading some things and the investment in podcast engineering school was something that, really changed the way I looked at and thought about what I wanted to sound like. And all of a sudden just getting it out there wasn't good enough.
Yep. That's what happens. You want to make it good. You want to provide a good experience for the listener. Totally.
Well, and there's research, one of the things I've done a couple of podcasts where I work as well, because I think it's a great medium for learning. And one of the things that there's a little research behind is that, if your podcast doesn't sound good, you lose credibility. And so you could have a spine surgeon on there talking about spine surgery, and if it sounds crappy, people are not going to believe him. And it's one of those things where it really does matter, especially if you're using it for something like, I'm doing more and more, which is using it as a learning vehicle. If you don't have good sound, it really detracts from your credibility and people don't take you seriously.
Yeah. And that, I've seen an article or two on that as well. And it's very subtle though, too. It's not like when you hear bad audio, you just immediately in your conscious mind think, oh, this guy's full of crap. I don't like this guy. You don't think it like, it's not always super like right in front of your conscious mind. It's very like almost subconscious, right? Where it's just that feeling you get that, I don't know, like, you know what I mean? It's subtle, but it is real and it's there.
Yeah. Well, in my case, even when I sound great, people still think I'm full of crap.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Oh man, Barry.
I will say, just so we don't have any confusion, I've been practicing to trying to do my oh yeah. So just so people know, I'm not that Barry.
I was gonna say, all right. So now we got to do it. So first we're gonna go with Barry, and then we're gonna go with Barry. Okay, and we'll let Barry go first. All right, and then you. Oh wait, then I'll follow it up with the other Barry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, oh yeah.
See, that's pretty close. I
Dude,
think I'm pretty
yours
good.
was pretty good, man.
Yeah. If you could send me a module chain so I sounded like that every day, I'd pay you for it.
Yeah, well, dude, I found this plugin. I think it's called Alter Boy. Actually, Jonathan Messenger, who's previous guest on this show, he produces the podcast called The Alien Adventures of Finn Caspian, which is an amazing show for kids and everything. He uses this plugin called Little Alter Boy, and it can change your voice to sound like a robot, and that's what he uses in his show. There's actually a character that's a robot, and he uses this plugin. But so I downloaded this plugin recently. It's from Sound Toys, actually, Sound Toys, and it does a bunch of stuff. It doesn't just do like the robot voice. There's one where you can pitch it down, and I tried it on myself, and it literally pitched my voice down like where Barry's is. You can even go deeper than that, but it starts to sound really weird. But dude, your Barry impersonation was really good.
Well, I'm just good on the yeah, oh yeah. I haven't worked on the, gonna need a couple mules.
All right, so when you record, so in your studio right there, you actually have people come in there and sit with you, and that's where you record, right?
Yeah, I would say probably 75% of the time I have people here because, again, mine is kind of a niche podcast, and everybody I talk to is here local. And, it's kind of it's strange because I can call them in, but one of the issues I run into is that the people I talk with are not podcast people. They're not audio people, and so they don't have a microphone at home. And capturing good sound remotely is kind of difficult, and really I get the best results just by plugging my phone into the L12 and trying to do some work on that, because by the time you get people to figure out how to connect, and they may put their earbuds in, but they're not talking through them. They're still out they still have their the audio coming through their computer, and it really helps when people are willing to come here, and I always throw in a nice local beer or two to kind of persuade them. So it works out better that way.
So wait, are you doing like a Mark Maron, like you set up in the garage or something in your house or something?
No, I've got a bedroom downstairs that I've just kind of, it's sort of a, I don't know, it's sort of a library room. I've got my bookshelves down here, and I've got a little treatment on the walls, and I've got my Yamaha, studio monitors, and my Mac and everything here. And so it's really kind of like a little pseudo studio.
Yeah. Well, no, it is a studio.
Yeah.
So wait, what Yamaha monitors do you have?
These are the HS5s.
HS5s. Oh, cool.
Yeah. They're and actually, I kind of lucked out. I bought them used from a guy who I don't think knew what he had, and got them pretty cheap.
Okay, good. Yeah, those are I've heard really good things about those. Cool. So, all right. So people are coming to your house, into your studio, and you sit there and you record, and you said, so you record on the L12 itself, and you also record in Reaper on the computer all at the same time.
Yeah, because it's, you never know what's going to happen. And I like having that backup, and I don't typically use the Reaper recording. I usually use the tracks that come out of the L12, but I do have that backup going.
Nice. And when you bring the file out of the L12, is it several files, or is it like a multi-channel WAV file? Or
Oh no, I record on separate tracks, and so I actually bring it in, and the way the L12 records it, it'll record each track separately, but then it also records one combined track. And so that way, I don't know if that, I don't see how that could be much of a backup, because if it screws up, it's going to screw up on all of them. But
Right.
but I usually bring in the the two separate tracks. Usually it's my voice and it's the guest voice, and I bring those into Reaper, even though I've already got the the ones in Reaper, and it's just I don't know why I do that. I mean, I think I do a little overkill on some things.
Well, it's okay. I mean, it's hard to know if, let's say, technically, if those two recordings are identical. I would think they're not identical. I mean, they might be very, very similar, but
well, it's easier, and I guess the reason why I do it is it's because the L12 records it as two separate tracks and as two separate WAV files. It's much easier to take each one and dump it into RX7 to clean it up before I move it over to Reaper.
There you go.
And so the ones that actually go into Reaper that I work with are much cleaner than the ones I record live.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's a perfectly fine way to do it. And so, okay, so you record it in the L12 and then you bring it into RX, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have, which RX do you have?
I have RX7.
RX7 advanced.
It's the expensive one, whichever one that is.
Yeah,
because
advanced.
I got the discount, and the upgrade was I didn't get any discount on the upgrade, but when I was in the PES school, I got RX6, and then I went ahead and upgraded to the advanced too.
Got it. So yeah, you have advanced, so that's cool. So right, so then you bring it into RX, and wow, you rattled off a bunch of things you do with it before. Now when you bring it into RX, do you just have like a, what do they call it, a module chain with a bunch of things, and you just apply them all at the same time?
Yeah, I took they have a default podcast module chain in there, and I took it and kind of modified it a little bit to do the things that I want to do. And the only thing I do all the cleanup in there. I don't do the EQ in RX. I save that for later. But I do all the things like the declip, the deplosive, I do phase. I mean, I do most of the things. What I'm trying to do in RX is really just make it as pure voice as possible. And then I don't worry about, kind of putting any effects on that voice or changing that voice until I get it back over to Reaper.
Got it. Yeah. So you're kind of doing like the cleanup of it, if there's any hums or if there's a little reverb, or you do the general cleanup. You're not actually doing like the mixing, like the EQ and the compression and all that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that RX7 has a Podcaster module chain. I didn't know this.
Well, they've got a whole series of different module chain defaults, and and I'm not sure what how they're set up, but it's but I kind of modified the one that's for podcast and do a few other things and take out some things that they were doing.
See, that's one of the downsides of being like an audio engineer for me, is that I don't even look for these pre-configured settings. Like sometimes I do. I'm not saying I don't, but like let's say the amateur in audio, they might look for these little, it's like a set, like a lot of people do it in Audition, right? There's a setting, it's like, makes your voice sound like it's on the radio or something. It's like a multi-band compressor or whatever. And people just apply it, and it probably sounds pretty good. But I always do everything manually. So a lot of times I'll miss these cool little module change settings.
Well, and the way I look at it, I mean, my first assumption is probably they know better than I do. and so I start there, but then I know enough to listen and know how I want it to sound. And so I start there and modify from that, because I usually get a better result than if I started just from scratch myself. Because again, I don't have the 30 years background that you do. I've got, 2 years background.
Yeah.
And so their default is probably a pretty good starting point for me.
Totally. And so now when you record stuff on location, do you also bring it into RX first as well?
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
And the only thing I do when I record on location is, the gear I use has a little bit of a, I take out a little bit of the, below 80,
right.
I kind of put a little bit of a filter on it and everything. And I just try to, all I want to do when I'm recording on location is try to keep people on the mic because there's so much background noise and so much other stuff going on. If I can just get them to speak into the microphone from a couple inches, I've pretty much done everything I need to do.
Yeah.
And then I can fix the rest.
Yeah, exactly. The rest you'll take care of later, but that's the one thing you got to do when you're in the recording phase.
And we recorded again, I work for a healthcare organization, and we do a podcast for CME credit for physicians, and we recorded our first one maybe a month ago, and I produced it, and we were in a room where above us apparently was a lunchroom, and so you had chairs squeaking and all this kind of stuff, and the two physicians who are actually doing the show did a really good job, but just having something like RX7 to take that file and put it over, I thought it was going to be crap.
Oh, but
I was absolutely amazed that you had to really listen and know that it was coming to find the one or two places where you could actually hear the chair scraping and all that kind of stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, see, that's great, man. That's a job well done when you can take a raw recording that is really noisy and distracting and just distracting, I guess is the best word. And then to be able to sort of massage that and use a tool like RX to make it into something where maybe there's still a couple distractions, but that's all, right?
Yeah. Well, of course, I went back to work and told them it just took me hours and hours to filter it out. And I didn't tell them I just like put it in RX7 and said, go.
There you go. Overtime. Put in like 18 hours of overtime. Come on. All right. So RX, you do a bunch of stuff in there. Did you ever record a file on location and then open it in RX7 and just like start to cry because it was so bad or something?
Well, I've been pretty fortunate that, and actually the ones I've done on location have been pretty good because I've got, I use the F8N, but I also have a Zoom H5. And sometimes I'll just put that, it has the Zoom mic attachment to the top of it.
Right.
And sometimes I'll put that on there and I can kind of control where it is, close to the person.
Right.
And so I've been pretty fortunate in terms of capturing things live. I've had a couple, the problem that I've had that has been the most difficult to work with have been times when I've, talked to somebody on the phone and they haven't had a really good connection.
Oh.
And they kind of fading in and out. And even in that one track, you've got different levels and you've got different pieces that kind of, sound really mechanical and everything. And so those are the times I cry is when someone's talking to me on their cell phone and they're driving through tunnels and stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah. Another thing that sometimes happens when you're recording stuff live is, you could kind of see recording live is sometimes really weird and not that easy because it's hard to get the level sometimes. Like you'll dial in a decent level and then like all of a sudden the person will start talking a lot louder. And then it's like you're already recording and they're already talking. So you don't really want to adjust the mic preamp after you start recording. But at the same time, if like if it's all of a sudden really loud and it looks like it's clipping, what do you do? So anyway, but that's why RX, the D-clip module is really handy for that, man. It's amazing.
Well, yeah, and the Zoom H5 is bad about that. If someone's, it'll clip in a hurry, and you almost have to use your arm like a fader. So if someone's getting excited, you got to kind of back away from them a little bit, and because it's because when I'm recording with that, it's easy because you hold it in your hand and just point it at somebody.
Right.
But if they're up and down and moving around, it's a little bit of a challenge to capture a good level.
Right. Wait, so the attachment you use on the Zoom H5, is that the regular stereo attachment, the left and right mics, or is it
I use the long kind of directional mic. It's maybe
shotgun.
6 inches long. Shotgun, yeah.
Okay.
With the squirrel on top, squirrel tail on top of it, and to cut down the wind noise, and that it seems to work pretty well.
That's cool. So you point it right at their mouth, basically, when they're talking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then when you're talking, you put it toward yourself.
Yeah, and the only disadvantage is you end up with both people on one track.
Right.
Which I mean, that's the disadvantage of it. But knowing, and I think the listeners know that you're in a kind of a live remote situation, so they give you a little bit of a leeway on that. But that's the only disadvantage in it.
Right.
You know, if I'm using the FN8, I can plug in, 8 microphones.
Yeah.
And have separate tracks. But that's the only disadvantage to using the shotgun mic on the F8 on the H5 like that.
Hey, you know what Alan Tepper did at NAB? He did a bunch of interviews on the exhibit floor, and he had, I think it was an H5 with the shotgun mic, and then he wears like a headset with a mic. Mm-hmm. So he'll be wearing a headset with a little mic coming right near his mouth, and then and he has his headset mic plugged into the H5, and then he also is recording the H5 with the shotgun pointed right at the person. So he can keep the shotgun mic pointed right at the person, and he can talk too, and it'll capture both voices.
Yeah, I mean, and that's probably what I should, because it's not like I don't have the headsets for it. So that's probably what I should do, is plug in one of my headsets that I use for remotes and do it that way. Yeah.
Which headset do you have?
I have
that we talked, the BPH S1. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. I've got a few sets of those. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are good. I was interviewed by Dan Hughley from Focusrite at NAB, and that's the first time I ever wore a pair of those with the mic and talked into it. And actually, they had the monitor volume on the mic was pretty loud. Like in my own headphones, I could hear my own voice, which is I never do. Like whenever I do my show, like I don't know, I keep my headphones so low compared to other people. People love cranking up their headphones. They want to hear themselves, or they want to hear the radio voice. Like I'm the opposite. I can hear myself fine through my own skull. I don't need, right? I don't need to hear myself, but I need to hear you if I'm interviewing you. So,
well, and I bought those headphones because I thought, you know what, it'd be really good to interview people like down the street at World of Beer, where there's a lot of noise coming on. If we both had those headphones on, we could still talk and be in kind of a loud situation, and it would still sound good.
But then don't you have to touch the mic and move it when you want to drink beer?
Well, yeah, you or get a straw.
Hey. Oh, jeez. Oh, God. I just watched that movie. Remember that old movie called Roadhouse?
Oh, yeah.
Patrick Swayze.
Mm-hmm.
I just watched that like a week ago. I hadn't seen it in at least 20 years, probably more. It's an interesting movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, Patrick Swayze's kind of in a bad way.
Well, he's actually passed away, right?
Yeah, I think he did. Just, he had.
Yeah. Like 5 years ago, he had, what was that?
Apparently, I'm way off on popular culture.
Yeah, it was pancreatic cancer, yeah.
Yeah, pancreatic. Mm-hmm.
Yep. All right, so we talked about RX-7. You clean up your files, and then you bring everything into Reaper. And so did you is Reaper the first DAW you ever used, or did you switch from something else?
No, I used, Reaper, well, way back when I played with Audacity a little bit, but I never could, it just never clicked for me. I don't know if it's something that I just never really understood it. And I'm not, I think I probably started exploring Reaper when I started listening to your show, because I started listening to your podcast engineering show as, because I'm in learning and development as a profession. So I'm an avid reader. I look at all this stuff. And so I was going through and just looking for everything I could about podcasting. And I think that's what kind of led me to Reaper. So it was really the first DAW that I used, to actually do something with.
Got it.
And then I went to, I go to Podcast Movement and everything, and I've been real curious about Audition. But I just think that it's for me, it's like Reaper's really good for putting your files in and doing some real basic kind of editing, like taking out the bleed and those kind of things. And it works really well with all my plugins. So to kind of work on the files in terms of making them sound good. But then I usually reduce all that down to one WAV file. So once I get both voices sounding good on the interviews, I reduce those down and kind of render them down to one WAV file.
Right, a mono track.
That's the WAV. Yeah, and that's the WAV file that goes into Audition. And I do all my mixing in Audition because there's something I don't like to edit in Audition, but I like the way you can put things together in Audition.
Interesting.
And I use Twistedwave to do the real detailed stuff. So it's kind of a detailed editor where I'll take that file from Reaper, and that's when I can really expand it out large enough to see all the little things, the lip smacks and the ums and whatnot. And I use that to go through and do the detailed editing. And so by the time I get that interview file and put it into Audition, it's pretty clean and ready to go.
Got it.
And the only thing I do to it at that point is about halfway through the episode, I'll cut it in half and put the advertisement for my sponsor in there. And at that point, that's the only thing I do to it. And my show intro and outro are already in the template, but I've got one track in there that's just like for my voice where I'll do a very kind of specific intro for that episode and maybe, a little outro for that episode. So,
okay.
So I do all the assembly in Audition.
Right. And then you render the final mix there. Mm-hmm. It's interesting the way you're doing it, because I produce a show where I do something very similar. I mix it in Reaper, same as you. Then I do my detailed editing in Twistedwave, same as you. And then you're bringing it into Audition. I bring it into a different Reaper session where I assemble the final episode. But same as you, same thing that you're doing, just I use Reaper for that instead of Audition. And one thing I like about that is when I'm initially in Reaper and I'm mixing the 2 voices or 3 voices together, like I'm using all my plugins, and I want to hear about what plugins you're using too, but I'll use my plugins, EQ, compression, de-essers, the whole everything. Then I mix it down and then I edit it. And what's cool is and then my client gives me some edits. Like if she wants me to cut certain things out, she'll give me timestamps and I'll cut it out, no problem. But then when I assemble the entire episode and I have the whole conversation in one mono track with all the voices combined, you know what I love? I love sometimes adding a little more compression or even multi-band compression sometimes. Like it almost gives me one more chance to mold it so it's really good, because sometimes you'll mix down something with multiple voices and later on you realize that maybe one voice is a little bit louder than another one. And so in the final template of the final episode, I can just add a little more compression and even out the voices, and then it's done.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because when you get to that point, it's almost like you have little blocks of content that you're just kind of building your show with. And each of those blocks you can do a little something with. But, so I do all that separately. Then by the time I bring it into Audition, I mean, it truly is literally an assembly of stuff.
Right.
And then it's just a matter of, because I've got some music in my show and things like that. And I've got like a music track, and it's just a matter of lining everything up. And I've been kind of playing a little bit with the master bus and how to, do a little bit there where I get a little bit more compression, maybe a little bit of a limiter and things like that. And just trying to, and that's really where I kind of refine that sound to get it where I want it. And again, if I had World Enough in Time, it'd be much closer to the way I want it. But every time I do an episode, I get one of 2 things happen. I either get a little bit closer to what I want, or I get a little bit farther away, which helps me eventually get to what I want.
Right. That's good. Yeah, it's a little bit of learning every episode. It just compounds. It's like compounded interest. So, all right, let's talk about in Reaper, cleaning it. When you clean up the original, let's say it's 2 voices, because you normally just do you and one guest. You're in Reaper, and you mentioned that you clean it up there. You sort of cut out the parts when someone's not speaking. So tell me about that process, how you do it.
Well, I've tried a couple different ways. I mean, one of the things I do, when I have time, I'll go through and actually cut those parts out, and then I'll put like a little fade in, fade out on either side of them. And so it doesn't sound like it's just, you don't hear it kind of like clip in and out. And right. So if, while my guest is speaking, I'll cut the part out, and it's very time consuming. And then I've also gone in and played with a gate where if I'm in a situation where the person I'm talking with is not a really loud talker and the bleed is not real, kind of a high level, sometimes I can take out 75, 80% of it with a gate. and it doesn't sound, the only thing you have to be careful with is making the other person when they come in and out sounding unnatural. And so sometimes I'll try that, and that's my first option if I can do it because it's quicker. But if it's not, I'll go through and just put cuts in and then fade in, fade out so that it sounds like it's fairly natural.
Right.
And then you have to, but then you get into those places where, and one of the things I found out is that in my podcast I do a lot of yeah. Because you have to decide how many of those you want to keep in, how many of those you want to take out.
Yeah.
And I end up taking out a lot of them because I go, wow, you just need to shut up and listen sometimes.
That's what I remember, like when I first got into podcasting, I know I used to do that, and I cured myself of that. I think. I mean, sometimes I'll say or cool or something, but you're right. There are, and I'm sure you're not that bad at it, but there are some people who like literally every 5 seconds it's like
Yeah.
and it's just like shut up.
Oh yeah, now I notice it in other podcasts too. I'm like, you can cut that stuff out.
That's true, yeah. So all right, so that's, you clean it up in Reaper, and just to be really clear on what you do, because I do the same thing, is like even for this episode, your voice, Barry, and my voice, like, I mean, I think we're both pretty good. We're both in quiet places and we're not making a lot of noise, so I probably don't have to do it. But like the thing you do and same thing I do is like when person A is talking, you literally cut out person B's track. You remove it so it's not even there. So you don't even hear background noise. You hear nothing. It's literally silent. And then it switches. When person B is talking, you cut out that blank space in person A, and it does take a lot of time because you got to go through the whole episode manually and cut this out and do the fades to make it fade nice. But it really, God, the way it turns out, it's really clean, right?
Yeah. And the only problem I have is when there's those moments when both people are kind of laughing or kind of talking, and when the tracks overlap, sometimes you still get a little bit of that. And if you listen close, you can hear it. It's almost like reverb. You get a little bit of that you can hear. And you just have to be careful that the distinction is not so great that you go, well, that sounded really different than what the rest of it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's okay though. I think, when both mics are on at the same time and both people are laughing or something, I think it's okay. People just through their perception, they can understand that it's two people now are talking and they can sort of hear the room a little bit. I think it's okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk Waves plugins, man. I mean, I'm like a plugin junkie. Everyone knows that. I mean, I got the scars on my arm to prove it.
Well, and this is one of the things I'll forever blame you for is I've never met a plugin I didn't like, and I've got many more plugins than I know what to do with, and part of I'm in Kentucky, so I'll say the bee in my bonnet is that I don't have enough time to learn how to really use the plugins that I have, and I have things sitting there that are just. They're just taunting me to say, you know what, you've got me. Now what you going to do with me?
Yeah. I don't know. I like it though. I think that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, and it's, and it's kind of funny because it gives you a little something to experiment with. And one of the things I'm working with right now is trying to really figure out, what is a de-esser I really like that I really know how to use in a way that's effective, because I probably have, 3 or 4 different de-essers. And even when you go into RX7, you have de-essers. And so there's de-essers all over the place, but they all work a little differently. They all sound a little differently. They're all a little bit more effective than others. And just trying to match up the de-esser with the person speaking is kind of a creative challenge that can be fun.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So which Waves plugins are you using like a lot?
Well, let's see. Almost everything I do has the Chef's Omni channel. I mean, that's usually one of the, and I have like, and I'm trying to remember some of the names of these off the top of my head, like the CLA 7.6.
Oh yeah.
I always use Vocal Rider on just about everything.
Oh, cool.
I just got one that I'm using. I can't remember exactly what the name of it is, but it's a master bus compressor.
Okay, is it
that I'm
SSL
using.
bus compressor?
Yeah. I think that's what it is. And of course, I've got I use the FabFilter EQ.
Oh man,
that I use.
Thing's awesome.
Yeah, and I've got the diff. Usually what I have is what's on sale for $29.
Me too.
And it's it's one of those things. And again, I know I don't use them all, and I certainly don't use them all to the effectiveness that they could be used. But they're there, and when I get time, I play with them. And one of these days, what I want to do is just sit down and take a book and read about 10 minutes worth of the book and just try all these different things and see how they work. Because, I know I'm not using all of them as effectively as I could, but the ones I go to pretty much every episode are the ones that I feel most comfortable with.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and the Shep's Omni channel is awesome. You could pretty much has everything.
And actually, and when I talk about using a gate, I mean that's usually where I go for the gate if I'm trying to hurry something and use a gate to clean things out. I go there for the gate. I mean, it's got the 2 de-essers, it's got the compressor, it's got so if I could only use one, that would probably be the one I'd go to first.
Right. All right, cool. So Twistedwave, which I also use, because I was trying to find like a good stereo editor on Mac, and SoundForge on Mac is horrendous. So I found Twistedwave, and I'm using that. So when you're cleaning up the conversation in Twistedwave, what are you just describe a little bit about what you're doing and what you're looking for and what you're taking out?
Well, for the most part, what I'm trying to do with Twistedwave is, I mean, I guess the best way to describe it is I'm trying to make sure that the flow of the conversation is continuous. And so a lot of things, I take out some open gaps where there's just someone going,
Right.
Because I want it to be some pace to the conversation. The hard thing is I go through and decide which ums to leave, which ones to not leave. And I always look at them kind of in relationship to the breaths that's surrounding them, because you can go through and I don't know if I've heard this in several places before, but if you're too aggressive in taking out breaths, it starts to sound a little bit robotic and unnatural. And so trying to figure out where are places where I can, kind of take out some things. And for the most part, when I go through Twistedwave, the thing that's top of mind is I want to figure out, how do I make this person sound so good that they want to share it with everybody they know on Instagram and Facebook and every place else? And so what I'm trying to do at that point is just make sure they sound good. And every and every and doesn't have to be taken out. But if someone has a particular kind of verbal tick, I don't want it to come across in the final episode.
Right. Cool. That's really good. All right. Then you bring everything into Audition, Adobe Audition. You assemble it. You have your music, your intro, your ads. You have the conversation itself. And you mix that all down to a stereo wave file at 48 kilohertz. Alan Tepper would love you. He's going to give you a hug if he sees you.
Well, everybody can use a hug,
Alan Tepper. What's up, Alan? Everyone say hi to Alan Tepper, please. Thank you. All right, so that's it. And then, so you mix it out of Adobe Audition, like I just said, stereo wave file at 48K, and then you run it through Auphonic to make the MP3?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll run it through Auphonic, and it's, I think it's one of those things where it's kind of a security blanket, because I'm a little bit, I haven't let go of that newness of being a podcaster yet, and I started doing Auphonic early on.
Right.
Before I felt confident in my own ability to level things. And so really when I run it through Auphonic, primarily just to check that ending leveling.
Okay.
Just to make sure that everything comes out sounding okay. And I usually run it through, and I get my MP3 from Auphonic, and now I guess it's just habit. I just do it because I've been doing it.
Got it. Yeah, because I was going to say, if you're using Adobe Audition, you can mix it out of Audition, and then you can open it up again in Audition in that little stereo editor part of Adobe Audition. And then there's a process called, I think it's called level match or something, where you can actually set it to the LUFS level right there in Audition, and then you can render it as an MP3 right from Adobe Audition as well. And it has the Fraunhofer MP3 encoder in Adobe Audition as well. So you could definitely do what you're doing in Audition without going through Auphonic. And I don't know if Auphonic uses the Fraunhofer, but
I don't think so. But I do think I'm going to be watching and waiting for the Chris Curran instructional video on how to do that in Audition.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. So I don't actually have Audition, but maybe someone in the community could make just a little short video of how to, mix down the multi-track to a stereo wave, open it in the detailed editor part, and level match it, and then save as an MP3. Yeah,
because that'd be great. Because again, Auphonics it's one more step, but it's also one more cost. And if I could avoid that, I think right now it's more than anything else a confidence factor.
Right.
It's just that I know if I run it through Auphonic, it's going to be level.
Totally.
And so that's probably more than anything else why I'm doing that.
Yeah, and that's okay. Like there's nothing wrong with maybe we definitely all have some processes in our lives where they're not optimized. Like we could probably look at anyone. You could look at anything you're doing in life, and there's probably 10 ways you could do it better and more efficiently. But there's habit, and then is it really worth making a big deal out of? And so, you know what I mean? So there are some things we do in audio production where might not be the perfect thing to do, but it's okay. And it you know what I mean? It'll still sound great.
Well, and at the end of the day, I think I'm ahead of a lot of people in the game because I've invested a little bit in learning, but I'm still relatively new at it too. And so it's, so I think it's finding out what I'm most comfortable with at my stage in development right now. And it's not unlike a lot of things in life where you've got to do the things that you feel most comfortable with, based on that growth continuum where you are. And I've learned a lot. I mean, I give you a lot of credit. I've learned a ton from you, and I've learned a lot from just reading and a lot of other folks out there. But still, I've been doing this a year and a half, 2 years, where there's people who've been doing it for years and years, and so it's one of those things where I'm just, part of it is building the confidence to appropriately apply the expertise you have.
Yeah. Well, you're doing a great job with your show. You're doing a great job with learning. I told you when we started PES, I tell all the students, this is not a 7-week course in that in 7 weeks you're going to be a professional and that's it, you're done. This is a multi-year process of becoming something, and all the little things you're doing, Barry, I'm really happy for you, and I'm proud of you that you're doing these little things to learn a little here, learn a little there. That's the way to do it. I mean, that's the secret right there. And you're going to, in the snap of fingers, 2-3 years is going to go by, and you're going to be at such a high level. I mean, you're at a high level now, but you're going to be at even a higher level then. And I know we all, even me, I just bought all these new plugins. I'm trying to make a space in my schedule of like maybe 4 hours that I can just mess around with my new plugins. It's hard to do, man. It's hard to find the time, right? Sometimes.
Well, yeah, and as soon as I get that time where I can mess with my plugins, I'll be like everybody else in podcasting and making millions and millions of dollars on my podcast.
That's right. And then making millions, you'll be able to fund that 1 week I talked about earlier when we can go stay in a cabin and mess around with gear.
Sponsored by Barry Gary. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Barry, this has been great. Everybody, go check out the Louisville Cycling Podcast, especially if you're a cycler, or just check out Barry's show. Listen to it for the sound quality.
And Phil, welcome to give feedback. And again, I love learning and feedback about, even if you just listen to the show just to call me and say, man, that sounded awful. I would love your feedback.
Yeah, feedback is great. So Barry, again, I'm proud of you, man. Thanks for coming on the show and sharing so much about your workflow and your equipment. And you know what you got to do at the end, right? You got to yell.
I practiced.
You practice? Oh, good. All right. Everyone in their car, riding a bike, walking down the street, or laying in your bed listening to this podcast right now, you have to yell, sound great. All right? Everyone, yell. And feel good when all the neighbors look at you funny, okay? All right? You ready? Let's go. Sound great!
Sound great! Yeah, oh yeah. Oh, forget it. Yeah, oh yeah.
You walk away from me well, and you can't play that part so well. Why do you play it out on me now? You like to lose control well. It's quite a feeling, isn't it? Let empty float and ripped it down now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. You change your attitude well. You say I just don't get it now. You say your eyes so far away now. You gave up on me well. So change your game and give away. You say I wouldn't understand now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. What do you want me to say? It's a lie. I don't wanna hear it. You react so angry. I want you to know you will never always be true. I've gone over all we've been through. Doesn't seem that long a time now. Things we did still hold that meaning. It doesn't mean it's still the same. You're pushing me away. You worked your theories now where you're getting worked up on you now. You work your way around somehow now. Yes, it hurts me now where that you don't talk to me at all. Now that these worlds have split apart now. You tell me that you found something better. How should I respond to that? Oh yeah, I say now it's a